If you really want to make significant habitual life change, choose one thing, make it as natural as breathing, and then once that's as natural as breathing, you're not even thinking about it anymore, then you stack on a related habit. This is Second Thoughts, and I'm Dr. Roger Hall. Welcome to the Second Thoughts podcast. Today, we're going to talk about National Quitters Day. And joining me today will be Nation. And as a result of this conversation, we hope we can help you avoid being one of the casualties of National Quitters Day.
I love it. So the first question I have for you is what is National Quitters Day? Because I never heard of it until you mentioned it. And then I guess dive into like the numbers behind her, like why it's a thing.
Yeah, so National Quitters Day is the second Friday after New Year's Day. And based on a study by Strava, the app that people can record their exercise, their bike trips or whatever and share it with their friends, 80% of people who made New Year's resolutions broke their New Year's resolution by the second week in January. Yeah, a good thing you made resolutions. So it's endemic in New Year's resolutions, and Happy New Year. It's endemic in New Year's resolutions that people quit them, and it's amazing how fast they quit their New Year's resolutions. When I ask audiences, show of hands, how many of you have made New Year's resolutions? The older the audience is, the fewer hands go up. And I said, well, is it because you're demoralized because you've broken every New Year's resolution you've ever made, so you just give up? And that's pretty much what's happened. So, this coming Friday is National Quitters Day.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's more of a demoralizing thing rather than like a psychological thing, or what's the difference?
Well, they're demoralized because they've failed so much in the past. The reason why people fail in their New Year's resolutions, and they go, it's lack of motivation, unrealistic goals, don't have a written out plan. Those are all reasons, but they're not the reason. The reason, if we look at habit formation, is the letter S. They make New Year's resolutions. And when I see people successful in habit change, which is essentially all a New Year's resolution is when they make a single New Year's resolution. It's just got to be one thing. When we look at human beings, we tend to get easily distracted. And if we have one thing to focus on, we're really good. If we have three things to focus on, we get distracted, we get confused, and we don't do any of them. And so people, they want to change their life. And for whatever reason, we mark New Year's as now's the time I'm going to change my life, which is kind of arbitrary. You could choose any day of the year. This is the day I'm going to change my life. But it's a custom to make these changes on New Year's Day. And if they would just pick one, they'd be far more likely to succeed. And this goes back to the idea of what's called a Keystone habit. And a Keystone habit, you can also call it a cornerstone habit, but a Keystone habit is once you get the habit in place and it just becomes part of your natural life, and it's as easy as breathing, you don't have to think about it. It really does become a habit. Then at that point, you can add on another habit. And the author James Clear of a wonderful book called Atomic Habits, he calls this habit stacking. So you take one habit and then you add another on top of it. And so what I encourage people is if you really want to make significant habitual life change, choose one thing, make it as natural as breathing. And then once that's as natural as breathing, you're not even thinking about it anymore, then you stack on a related habit. I'll give you an example. We all brush our teeth, and it's a habit we have all, let's hope, if you haven't, if toothbrushing is not your habit, I don't want to know. I don't want to be around you, but I don't want to know. But we all brush our teeth. And so we don't think about it. And I'll tell you why habits are important in a minute. But and the reason they're important is because we don't have to think about them. But there's an author, Casey Means, and she's a physician. She wrote a book with her brother called Good Energy. And in it, she talks about a habit stack. She says, everybody needs to go outside and experience the weather for at least a couple minutes. And so if it's cold, you need to be outside. If it's hot, you need to be outside. And she says, and you need sunlight. So when I brush my teeth, here's her habit stack. She's already got toothbrushing as a habit, and she wants to go outside more. So what she does is she walks outside while she's brushing her teeth. That's her habit now. So she's stacked getting outside in the cold, getting outside in the heat. It doesn't matter. She's outside. She walks around her house while she's brushing her teeth. I'm sure her neighbors think she's insane. But if you're going to make your life better, most of your neighbors will think you're insane. They won't understand it. So good for her. So she stacked those two habits, but she took one that she already has and stacked on another. And if you want to change your life, choose one thing at a time. Once it becomes as easy as breathing, then you add another. The problem is, if you have two at a time, you're not very good at one, and then you're taking your attention to the other. And human beings have a limited amount of cognitive capacity. We have a daily decisional load. There's a certain number of decisions we can make each day. Big decisions, little decisions. It doesn't matter. They all add up. And at the end of that time, your brain becomes fatigued. There's an author, Roy Baumeister, he calls it ego depletion, which is kind of a fancy term, but we all know that experience of not being able to decide at the end of the day. You've been answering emails all day. You go home to your loved one, you're in the kitchen, and you go, oh, what do you want for dinner? Oh, what do you want for dinner? I mean, you can't even decide on dinner because making dinner requires about 57 decisions, and you're all decided out. So what habits do is habits are long behavioral strings of complicated behavior about which you don't have to think anymore. So toothbrushing is a great example. If you have a commute to work, you take the same route every day, same way, and sometimes you don't even remember how you got to work because it's the same route. You miss what's on the road. And you think, well, was I asleep? Was I hypnotized? Why can't I remember? Well, it's because your mind was occupied elsewhere deciding, while a part of your brain not involved in conscious decision-making was getting you to work, getting your teeth brushed.
So that was a good example of just like doing a habit so easily that you just like forget about it.
And that's the purpose of habits.
Okay.
So that you do things so that you forget about it. So you don't use any
easier to breathe
decisions on things that you do over and over. That's the beauty of habits, is they're so easy, you can save your brain power for more important things.
Okay.
And if you're trying to do two new things at once, you've got to decide about this thing, then you got to decide about that thing. And it's too many. It's physically taxing. So your brain occupies between, depending on how big of a person you are, between 2 and 5% of your body mass. That's
2 and 5%.
2 to 5%. So
wow,
it's 1/20th or less of your body mass. 1/20th. Wow. But it uses 20 to 25% of the energy in your food.
The brain's using more than like than your muscles, it seems like.
Oh, it's an enormous consumer of energy.
That's
glucose, ketones, depending on your diet. It's burning fuel all the time. So every fork you put in your mouth, one of those 5 forks or one of those 4 forks full of food is for your brain.
Wow.
Even though it's between 2 and 5% of your body mass. So you look at this and you think your brain is burning fuel all the time. Well, that's the reason we sleep is for our brain to recover. It's still active in the middle of the night, but different parts are active. But it's a huge consumer of energy. Habits allow your brain to go on autopilot and save that energy for other more important decisions.
Yeah.
And so successful people have incredibly tight habits and to most people, incredibly restricted lives because they're focusing all of their brain energy on the more important things. So they're very habitual. People go, that's kind of odd. Okay, so let's look at some famous examples. Steve Jobs, when he was alive, what were his decisions he made about clothing? Every day, we all have to decide what we're going to wear. What does Steve Jobs wear?
I mean, I've seen the iconic turtleneck.
Black turtleneck or t-shirt, blue jeans. The end. His whole closet was blue jeans on the bottom, turtlenecks, and t-shirts on the top. That's it.
He's like the B movie, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow. Oh, yellow and black.
I mean, it's perfect. Zuckerberg, okay? Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook. What's his uniform? Blue jeans and a hoodie. Okay, so he's not like, am I going to wear the Armani today? Which custom suit am I going to pick out? They're not wasting their decisions on any of that.
Wow.
Because they're saving their decisions for more important things. Now, I'm not Zuckerberg and I'm not Steve Jobs. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not any of those guys. But my wife makes fun of me because I have very limited choices of clothes. Like this morning, I got up and I thought brown shoes because I have two colors of shoes. I have brown shoes, I have black shoes. I don't have cordovan shoes. I don't have multicolored sneakers. I have black shoes, I have brown shoes. The end. Okay?
Yeah.
And so when I think, okay, I'm going to wear brown shoes today, then I know what color socks, brown, because I have brown socks, I have black socks. I don't have wild socks. I know that's a fashion thing right now, but that's not my thing. And then I have like my brown or green or olive pants. I have I have two uniforms. And so my wife says, have you ever thought about like a checked shirt? No.
Never thought about
maybe like a flannel plaid? No. Some stripes maybe? No. And she goes, you're so boring. And I said, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
So, because I'm not in my closet going, I wonder if these would go together. I mean, it just goes and so I don't have to think about it. And so that's one of the brain saving habits that I have. I have very specific ways that I eat. So if I'm on the road and I'm staying at a hotel, they'll go, oh, we have a wonderful buffet here today. And would you like to look at the buffet? No. If you order off the menu, it'll still be the same cost as the buffet. Okay. And they go, and so what would you like? And I say, I'd like 2 eggs scrambled with salsa, a side of Cholula, a cup of coffee, and cream. Would you like toast with that? No. How about some hash browns or home fries? No. Fruit? No. And they say, well, it'll be the same. We've got French toast. We can make you custom waffles. No, I don't want any of it. Because if I go to the buffet, I have to decide between link sausage and pate sausage. And, doesn't French toast sound good today? No, I don't want to decide any of that because I'm saving my brain power for the reason I'm on the road, my work. Now, people go, well, that's not a very big decision. No, it's not a big decision, but every decision adds up. So there was a study in London, and they took two groups of people. They took a big group of people, and they tested them for their IQ. And then they had this average equal, they split it into two groups where the average of both groups had the same IQ. So, there's variability in each group, but on average, the same IQ. One group, they said, you need to answer email for 2 hours. And so they answered the email for 2 hours, and then they retested their IQ. What did they find?
Is it lower?
Yeah, went lower.
Oh, wow.
Then they had another group. They said, we're going to have you smoke weed for 2 hours and get stoned. And they did. And then at the end of the 2 hours of these stoned people, they hadn't take their IQ test again. What happened to their IQ?
They go up?
No, it went down. Everybody said, do you used to go up? No, it went down. It went down. But it didn't go down as much as answering email. So we know that when you're stoned, you've got cognitive deficits. You've got impairment in your ability to solve problems. But you're not as impaired stoned as you are after 2 hours of email.
Wow.
Now, the moral of the story is, so I should get stoned instead of, no, I'm not. And that's what I got, stoned and answer your email. It's really a disaster. What it tells us is that all of those decisions, all those tiny little decisions like junk, oh, let me look at that. No, I'll just skim it. No, I'll set a reminder. All of those 2 hours of decision making, even though they're all tiny decisions, they add up to create fatigue. So if you want to change your life, it's about setting up habits for as many things as possible, setting up systems so that you can save this limited resource for the more important things.
And doing it one at a time, like you're mentioning before, right?
Which is why in my book, Staying Happy, I talk about change things one at a time for this very reason.
Yeah.
That people, they try to change too many things at once and they can't do it. I started out my career in the substance abuse field, and people would say, well, you got to go cold turkey on everything. And success rates were kind of low. When people would stop one substance at a time, they had far more success. And it was always the last substance to go was nicotine.
Really? What?
Which is the hardest. It's the hardest to get off of. It's not the most deadly. Alcohol is the most deadly. But nicotine is the hardest to get off of.
That's crazy. Wow.
So, that's why AA meetings are full of smokers, because they've given up everything but that.
That's smoking. Wow. Yeah. So for National Quitters Day, I think I want to talk about the culture a little bit. Is National Quitters Day like just an American thing, or is it worldwide? Or like just end of year, like resolutions and stuff?
I don't know about the habits of resolutions in other countries. Other cultures, Chinese, they have a different New Year than we do. So January 1st on our calendar is important to us, but not so much for the Chinese. But what I know is that human beings all around the world, no matter the culture, they still have the same kind of brain capacity.
Right.
So they're going to have the same problem of managing their attention and their decisions.
Right. So for somebody who wanted to start a new habit, let's say it's working out, which is pretty common from my understanding, what would you suggest would be like a pattern to get into a habit? Specific like day-to-day pattern, or even every other day, because workouts are pretty black and white. You're there, you're not.
Well, but no, it's not. Okay. It's not. It depends on what the workout is. And there are thousands of little resistance points to working out. And anytime there's a little speed bump on against working out, you will divert to not working out. So you have to make it so that you can't help but work out.
Okay.
And so you choose your ritual, whatever it is. If it's a rowing machine, if it's playing basketball, if it's walking your dog, if it's yoga, it doesn't really matter to me what the content is, but you've got to make it so that you can't help but do the exercise. And in my business, we call this stimulus control, which is you change your environment so that your environment makes it easier for you to do the right thing.
Okay.
So for example, if running is your thing, one of the pieces of resistance in the morning is, oh, I got to go get my clothes. So I got to get my running clothes, and then I got to get my shoes, and there are serious runners who will go to bed and sleep in their running clothes.
Oh, wow.
So when they get up in the morning, they're already dressed. All they have to do is put on their shoes. And they have their shoes right beside the bed, unlaced, ready to put on. So before their feet hit the ground, they're in the shoes. So what these people have done is they've created an environment that helps them to do the right thing. So if you think, oh, I'm going to join a gym, great. Is the gym on the way to something you normally go to?
Right.
You pass it a lot in your commute, because if you have to go out of your way, you're not going to do it nearly as much.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So for the quitters and stuff like that, I know there's redemption and you can come back and can you continue to try. What would you suggest for people who've already made that mental sort of like, oh, I quit it already, so like I'm just not going to do it for the rest of the year? What would you suggest?
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you asked that question. There is no such thing as smooth progress. We all think, oh, I'm gonna have good progress. And what we have is called Sawtooth progress. And so you start down here. I'm trying to get in the camera. You start down here and you think you're going to go up. Well, what happens is you go up, then you go down, then you go up, then you go down. And eventually over time, you go up. And you have to look at the long term. Yeah, people quit all the time. People stop exercising all the time. And then they start again. And it's just a matter of continually going up and recognizing progress is never smooth. It's always sawtooth. It always goes up and down as the general trend goes up.
Right.
So if you tell yourself, oh, I stopped exercising, I'm a loser, I'll never exercise, I'm just going to be out of shape, unhealthy, and die early. Oh, okay, if you want to believe that. But what I'd encourage you to believe instead is, oh, okay, it's time for me to get back at that. Because it isn't about perfection. You know, the world was built on B and C students. I mean, they're the ones who make everything go. I mean, the A students, they're all professors, okay? The B and the C students actually built, civilization.
Yeah.
And so they know how to fail. And so I don't really worry about B and C students because they already know that they fail and they still keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't worry about them. It's the A students that I worry about.
Yeah. Okay. How could you, because everybody sets pretty grand resolutions every year, at least I know I do. What tools or advice would you give somebody to like actually set realistic goals and maybe give some examples of like what is a realistic goal and what's unrealistic?
Well, okay. So when I was a kid, I loved archery and I love all the target sports. I mean, I love darts. I love archery. I love anything with a target. I love. So if my target is 20 yards away and I've got the bow back here and I'm about to release the arrow. Once the arrow is launched, it's launched. 1 millimeter of change at the point of the release is enough to either keep me on target or take me off target. And so if your target is a long way away, you only need to make a 1 millimeter change now to be on the target.
Wow.
So I'll give you an example that I'm stealing from a very famous person. A lot of people who know the motivational speaker world, there was a guy named Zig Ziglar.
Okay.
he was really popular in the 1980s and the 1990s. He's since passed away. I got to meet him. And when I heard him speak, he said, I went to my doctor and he said, Zig, you got to lose, I think it was like 30 pounds. And he's like, I'm a motivational speaker. I'm going to lose this. And the doctor said, I'm going to lose it in 3 months, 10 pounds a month. And the doctor said, Zig, how long did it take you to gain this weight? And he goes, I don't know. I guess it's been trending up for the last 7 years. And he said, so your goal should be to lose 30 pounds in 7 years. And so what Zig did is he did the long division. And he figured, okay, 30 pounds, 7 years, how much weight do I need to lose each day? And he realized it was like an ounce. He needed to lose an ounce a day. So every day at some meal, he'd look at one thing of food on his plate and go, I don't need that. That's an ounce. I'm not eating that. And 7 years later, he dropped all the weight. So all he did was make that little millimeter change. And 7 years later, he was in a different place. So what I encourage people to do is make these tiny little incremental changes, and those become your keystone habits. His keystone habit was, I'm going to leave one spoonful of ice cream in the bowl. It's not that he gave up ice cream for good and it's the devil and don't eat those bad foods. He just gave up one spoonful. And that's what the keystone habit was. And over time, it accumulated, like interest does in money, it accumulated benefit. So what's the daily habit that you can do, the tiny little thing that will change the course of your life?
That's really good. Yeah, that brings up another thing too. I think people hearing that will feel pretty motivated. What is motivation? Where does it come from? And how can people sustain in motivation? Because that's where these start, Most people start it because they feel inspired or motivated to do these resolutions.
And that inspiration or motivation is usually external to them.
Right, yeah.
So, and there's a lot of research on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And what we know about extrinsic motivation is it doesn't last. So you'll go hear a motivational speaker, you'll get all hopped up and you'll walk on the coals and you'll do, the dances and you're going to change your life and you'll make all of these promises to yourself. And then you fall off the wagon. Intrinsic or internal motivation is fundamentally different. And that's the only one that lasts. And if you look at the research on motivation, internal motivation, we think, well, I'm going to, like if you want to be a writer, I'm going to write when I feel motivated, right? When the inspiration hits me. No. Inspiration does not lead to hard work. The formula is hard work leads to inspiration.
Wow.
And that's why people don't do things, is because it takes effort to, if you're going to use writing, it takes effort to sit down every day for 30 minutes, and whether you got something or nothing, you're writing. And sometimes you throw away the product of that half hour of sitting down and writing, but that's how it gets done. So getting yourself hopped up, getting yourself excited about stuff, that helps in the short run, but it doesn't help in the long run. What helps in the long run is starting to do the work. Now people say, well, what about accountability? Well, accountability is good for people who care what other people think. And there's a subset of the population that care what their friends think. So there are these exercise programs where you all agree you're going to do this. Was it 75 hard?
Yeah, 75 hard is
75 hard is really popular.
I have friends who do that. I know so many people that do that.
Yeah. And so what keeps people doing 75 hard? Well, it's the humiliation, embarrassment, and shame of not filling it. Well, what I know about long-term motivation is guilt, embarrassment, shame. Those are fear. Those are lousy long-term motivators. They're efficient in that they get you to do something right now you don't do what I want, I'm going to hit you. Yeah, you'll get them to do it until you're not there. And then it's like pound sand. If you really want long-term change, that all has to happen from desire. And desire comes from hard work. That's not the news anybody wants to hear.
No.
They want to know that one weird trick to get motivated. Well, the one weird trick to get motivated is work hard. A little bit each day. It's going to suck for a while, and then it gets easier.
Well, that's all the questions that I had. So
let me add this one thing.
I love it.
The lie people tell themselves, and the lie I tell myself, is I don't like to work out. It feels awful. That's the lie. It's mostly true, which is the reality is the first 5 minutes of working out feels terrible. And then about minute 6 or minute 7, it starts to feel good. And that's the way it is with anything worthwhile. It's hard before it gets better. It's hard before it gets easier. It's hard before it gets pleasurable. So you've got to just suck it up and say, okay, this is going to suck for about 5 minutes and then it'll get better.
Right. Okay. That's inspiring, motivational, externally. Appreciate it, Hunter.
I think it's just the truth. It's how people work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people will take this and like no actionable steps on how to continue. And especially with the failure thing, that is so hard. Once you've already set that in your mind, like, oh man, I've already failed, coming back from it is so grueling.
But see, that's all a head game thing.
Yeah.
Which is, oh, I failed. No, you didn't fail. You just stopped exercising for a few days, or you stopped eating well for a few days. Whatever it is, you just stopped. Okay, it's time to start again. I mean, it's like a light switch. Oh, I turned off the lights. They'll never go on again. Let's just turn on the light switch. Turn it on again. If you tell yourself you're a failure, you will be a failure.
Right.
You know, there's that famous quote, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And if you think you're a failure, you're right. If you think, hey, it's just time to turn on the light switch again, you're right.
Yeah. I guess I got one more question, I think. You give a lot of advice on like habits. And so what are some practical pieces of advice that people can use to remind themselves of like motivation and internal motivation and how to keep going? You know, because for me, in like actually writing something down has made a big difference in my motivation for getting something done or whatever.
Yeah. You bring up I'll talk about a couple things, but you bring up a point I wasn't going to bring up, which is the importance of writing. If we look at research on goal setting, everybody has goals, but people who write down their goals, they're far more likely to achieve them if they write them down and regularly review them.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
You know, if you've done a New Year's resolution, write it down somewhere. And then here's another thing. Human beings want to be internally consistent. We hate internal inconsistency. So if you write it down and you sign your name to it, even if you never show it to anybody else, you're far more likely to do what you've written down.
Like sign your name, like check. Oh, so like literally like when you sign a check.
Like when you sign a check.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you sign it with your name, we've got this habit of thinking, oh, okay, when I sign something, I really mean it because that's like a contract.
Yeah, what? Oh, no.
So writing it down and signing it is a magic act. It makes us feel we want to be internally consistent, so we'll do it. So that's one thing. So I'm glad you said write it down. But I talk already about stimulus control. Change your environment so you can't help but do the right thing. Another one is novel reminders. And what I encourage people to do is associate something in your world with that you're going to see in your everyday world. And my book, DIY Brain, is built on this concept that you find something in your life that reminds you to change a mental habit. And so you can use some cue in your environment, a sound, a noise, a light, some stimulus that you're going to see. And that is to remind you of the right pattern of thinking. So if you're driving down the road, you can say, every time I see a white Subaru, I'm going to think X. It doesn't matter if it's a white Subaru or if it's a blue Ford. I don't really care. It's that you've decided that's going to be my reminder. And we used to do this when we played a game called Slug Bug.
Yeah.
So if you remember this game, anytime you'd see a Volkswagen Beetle, you get to punch somebody in the car. But what it does is it prepares you to see this, and it reminds you of a certain behavior, which is get ready to punch somebody.
Right.
Well, if you choose a different car and use that to remind you of a different mental behavior, that's a novel reminder.
Okay. So novel, just like, I don't know, maybe break down like what the word novel means for people like me.
New. I mean, it also means like a book you can read.
Right.
Novel means new. So it's a reminder that kind of surprises you.
So it can either be like trivial. It doesn't even need to be like a location. It can be something so basic as like a white Subaru.
Like a white Subaru. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So there's this rhyme. You see a penny on the ground. Have you ever heard, find a penny, pick it up, rest of the day you'll have good luck? Have you ever heard this?
No. But I know the crack, step on a crack, you break.
Step on a crack.
I know that one.
Yeah. So all of those are designed to help you pay attention. These rhymes help you pay attention to something in your environment. Now, step on a crack, break your mother's back. That's worse.
Yeah.
But if you hear the rhyme, find a penny, pick it up, the rest of the day you'll have good luck. So you pick up a penny, you say that little rehearsal in your head, and then you think, okay, the rest of the day is going to be good. And you put that penny in your pocket, and you think, and every time you feel that penny, because nobody carries pennies anymore.
Yeah.
You think, I'm going to have a good day. Okay. And so that's the novel reminder, but then the penny in the pocket takes us to what I call an irritating reminder. And you can literally put something in your pocket to remind you of a commitment. And in the military, they have a thing called a challenge coin. And have you heard of these?
No, I've never heard of that.
So if you're a part of a military unit, they'll have a coin that represents the motto or the of the group or the goal of the group or their logo. And it's a pretty sizable thing. It's about the size of a silver dollar. It's pretty thick. And not like a Sacagawea dollar, which is, like the size of a quarter. I mean, this is a big thing. And you put it in your pocket. Now, if you go somewhere and someone from that group, if you're at a bar and someone from that group pulls out the coin and puts it on the bar, everybody has to bring their coin out. And whoever doesn't have the coin has to buy drinks.
What? That's funny.
Now, it's a beautiful setup for this irritating reminder, because this thing is in your pocket reminding you of something that's so important to you. And there's a social element, which is you're going to carry the coin because you don't want to buy drinks.
Yeah, there's a consequence.
Every time you fish around in your pocket, you find this coin, and it reminds you of the purpose for that group or the camaraderie of that group. And so it serves as an irritating reminder of things that you want in your head or habits. So what I would encourage people to do is find your own challenge coin, put it in your pocket. Every time you feel it, it will remind you of your goal.
Wow. Okay. Well, those are really practical. I think I'll be using, definitely. I've never thought about the signing one. Like when you write something, you actually sign it. So thanks for sharing that.
Well, that comes from what the Chinese communists did to American prisoners of war to begin the brainwashing process, which is kill another.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Maybe I won't be then.
No. What it points out is there are very simple means to change your thinking and your habits, and they're all really pretty subtle. There's no torture involved.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any piece of advice for people who are quitting on National Quitters Day?
I think, Nation, I think the most important point you brought up was, what do you do after you quit? We all quit. Just turn the light switch back on again. And you turn it off. Okay, turn it back on. And you can start again on Saturday.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yes, thanks for asking. I appreciate our time together. So this is Second Thoughts with Roger Hall, and we've been talking about Quitters Day. You can follow this on YouTube, on Rumble. You can download this podcast on all of the major platforms, on Apple, on the Google platform. It's almost everywhere.